What is our opening prayer? Is it Jonathan or?
Sure.
Yeah, Jonathan, go for it.
Yeah. Right. We stand. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for your many blessings. We thank you for this food that you have provided, a further evidence of your goodness and grace in our lives. Bless it to the healthiness of our bodies. Father, we pray for our discussion and time today. We pray for the work of the Charter Review Advisory Board. Father, we thank you for their willingness to serve our city and her citizens and businesses. We pray that all that we deliberate today and discuss would bring honor and glory to you. Give us wisdom and give us discernment and give us courage. Continue to uplift our men and women in uniform, as well as all of our first responders that work every day to keep us safe. We ask all this in the name of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I guess I was.
Jan, you mind doing the roll call
Chairman Byrd,
here?
Mr. Danzy will be late. Mr. Ferrera.
Here.
Mr. Henderson Jansenius.
Here.
Ms. Schoon. Here. Mr. Chairman, you have quorum.
You guys had an opportunity to consider the minutes from the last meeting? I looked at it, I have a turn. There's no revisions on it, motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Favor there. The audience or Zoom comments or anything like that?
Is anybody on Zoom, Ms. Cloud, other than us?
It's us.
Thank you. There's no one online, so we're Chairman. We are streaming live though, or recording it. Sorry.
Sure. All right, well, let's do our staff reports. I think we have a few.
You do, yes. Just for myself, Zimmerman's team has some additional stuff as well, but as requested, we get some information from around the state, roughly 35 or so examples of how elected officials are paid in other cities and towns around the state of Florida, as well as the current active boards that we have and their calendars, where they meet, who's on them. All the information, I did email that out to you guys in advance of today's meetings. And as you'll see on the salary front, I mean, you really got a little bit of everything here. You've got some, some smaller cities and some medium-sized cities and some very large cities in here. A few of them have it kind of baked into their charter. Some of it is set by ordinance, which is how we do it here at the city of Panama City. Some of them are, which I found to be very interesting. They kind of tie it to the county commissioners, and then it's just a percentage of it. And so that's how both Leon County does it like that. And actually theirs is set 100%. And then in Volusia County, which is Daytona Beach, that's a percentage. It's 75% of the county commission salary. And then there's another one that I think is like Venice Beach, which I think is Collier County. It's 20%. So in America, it's a little bit more. So you've got all these options here just to kind of show how it is throughout here. Seems like most folks do kind of have it baked in a very formal fashion, and it's not really just simply left up to the elected officials just to kind of change it as they see fit. So happy to entertain any questions about this. If there's any more detailed questions on the board meeting, Ms. Smith can address some of that. But I think this hopefully just gave you guys some of the information that you wanted in order to think about how to frame the salary for the elected officials moving forward.
Question for staff at this point. I know we're going to discuss it, but
I would just add one thing, Mr. Chairman. I think if you look at, for example, Volusia County, which is Daytona Beach, mayor receives kind of right in the middle. Mayor receives 75% of the county commissioner's salary, and then council gets sheet. Yeah, you have through email, and then it's also item number 7 in today's agenda.
oh,
Yeah, I emailed this out, but then you've
I'm
also
sorry.
got it printed by Ms. Smith.
I saw this.
Yes.
I did not see the.
All good.
Give me one second.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one more page back.
There we go.
Are we prepared to press it now?
I really just, I'm sure, my goal is to get into a pattern of the last half questions. I mean, as far as substantive stuff, it definitely like flows together at times, but. Brandon, what am I missing?
Second, right there.
Yeah. So just as a quick aside, like, so Daytona Beach, which is right in the middle, it's Volusia County. You know, the mayor receives 75% of what the county commissioners get. And of course, that's set, you know, by the state. There's a formula, it's based on population. I think that makes a lot of sense. Then you see the council gets 75% of the mayor's salary. That's because I think in that situation, the mayor, you know, probably does a lot more than your commissioners. Here in Panama City, and you'll see this kind of a little bit more similar maybe to how, you know, kind of how Venice does it, where it's a percentage of the county commissioner salary for all of them, and then the mayor gets like an extra $1,200 or an extra, you know, extra 10 grand or something. That's if you do a little bit more. That's kind of how we are right now. You kind of have that base salary here for our elected officials, which I did compare us to Panama City Beach, Lynn Haven, and then Bay County at the bottom. Basically here, our lowest full-time paid employee is the entry salary for our commissioners. And then the mayor gets an extra, I think, $1,800 on top of that. So that's kind of similar where the mayor just does a little bit more. So, you know, if you wanted to kind of follow that route and do it like a percentage of the county, you know, I think giving a little bit extra to the mayor would be appropriate. I don't know that I would necessarily do like, you know, 75% for the mayor and then of that 75% for the commissioners, because they do a lot, you know, having ward specific representation. So, but again, as a reminder that all of our county commissioner salaries in the state of Florida and the 6 constitutional officers, all those are really set by the legislature. There is a formula and it's driven by population in that respective county. So, and that information is provided earlier by Mr. Zimmerman and his team. So, and as a reminder, it looks like this right here, if you probably still have it in your files. Okay?
The county commissioners' salaries are set by the state.
Yeah. Correct. Yes, sir.
Oh, I didn't see Mike down there. Oh, wait, see you too. I guess I'm being aspirational here. Any other questions about the data that we've provided? We'll go into the substance of it shortly here. But any questions or other information we want from Jonathan?
Good job on the day.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome. Miss Smith's team gets most of the credit.
There just happened to be a survey, with the,
We still thank them though.
yeah.
Explain. Yeah.
Florida Association of City Clerks or something,
Yeah,
right?
Florida Association of City Clerks
All
just
right,
happened to be doing a survey and I was like, oh, I'm just send all these.
I just put it in a spreadsheet. That's all.
May I just add that I happen to have this information already regarding whether salaries in certain cities was in their charter or by ordinance, by resolution. So I just pulled that together and added that today. It just gives you a kind of a concept of how many, you know, whether it's by charter, whether it's by ordinance, it's a mixed bag.
And just make sure I understand, is there an effective difference between ordinance and resolution?
No.
Okay. To me, it's still a commission decision.
Ordinance requires 2 readings and
Okay.
then resolution is just 1.
All right. I know my concern was more so at what layer is the decision made? Charter is obviously a citizen vote. Ordinance, resolution, policy, whatever else is a commission level vote, even though there's maybe a little bit more formality to it.
Correct.
What are the step increases here for Panama City?
I mean, basically every step I think is like 3.3%.
So how would a commissioner be eligible for a step increase?
After
1 year, 2 years, 3 years,
and then
5
5
years,
years.
7 or 8, and then 10, I think.
So we basically have grades 1 through 26 positions, although we don't have any grades 1, 2, or 3 that are actively working for the city. So the lowest full-time employee right now is a grade 4 position. And then there are 1 through 16 different steps. And to Ms. Smith's point, it's based on seniority and how many years you
And the
serve.
commissioners are part of.
They are part of that.
Gotcha.
What is the status quo as far as other benefits for the commissioners and the mayor in Panama City?
So they have same options as the city. For the only difference is they get they get a $500 a month car allowance that's automatic, and I think that's probably, I don't know if that's ordinance or not.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, but they
Then the.
Well, it's gotta be by ordinance because it's not by charter.
Yeah.
okay, then it's by ordinance and they get that. And the only difference is some of the directors and senior managers would get either $300 or $400 depending on how much they drive, but they get access to health insurance. They have, same options to the general employment pension fund, as well as the executive management.
When you say access to health insurance, that's something.
They don't have to take it if they don't want it. If they choose to take it, they can.
Okay, but if they don't take it, they don't get anything else.
No.
That's just okay, all right.
And they do have to do the same contributions an employee would have to do for the insurance, apply them, and vision and dental as well.
Okay.
And
And then-
then short and long-term
And
disability.
then how does the pension system work?
So it's, there's general employees and the city contributes 10% of the annual salary on behalf of the employee with no match. And that goes into like goes into an investment fund. It's like a 401k, but it's not a K, it's another letter. They have the option to do pre-tax deferral like a 457B if they want, but there's no contribution on the city's behalf. And then they've got the supplemental pension has 3 different vesting classes. That is a defined benefit. So they contribute 4.5, it's whatever the actuary dictates that year. Then the city matches that in contribution. And then that pension plan,
Other one.
sorry, city contributes. Go ahead, Jim.
Employee contributes 4.5, the city contributes whatever the actuary says the
Thank you.
difference.
Is there a vesting period?
There is. So there's 3 classes. The elected officials are in class 1. I believe it's a 6-year vest to 100%. Class 2 is, and I think the
I'm in
appointed,
class 1 as well.
you're in class 1 and Jan is as well. Then there's class 2, which is the assistant city managers is a 6-year vest. And then class 3 is our department heads, directors. And that's a 20% vest at 6 years with fully vested at 10.
And so commissioners are class 1.
Correct.
So if you're a commissioner for 6 years, you get your commission salary for the rest of your life.
You get,
It's a
no, you
percentage.
get a varies, it's once you vest, it's 1% of your earnings. And then that compounds every year an additional 1% of length of service. So we have like Commissioner Mike Nichols, for example, I think he served 12 years, 16,
Do what?
10. Okay. So 10 years.
Just
His-
under 10.
Pick a number.
He's around $400 a month is what he's receiving. So, and that pension
Oh, I
contribution.
see.
So it's much, you'd have to do a very, very long time to receive your.
Yeah.
Your,
106 years.
yeah.
But it's,
Yeah.
but it's minimum of $50 a month.
And the pension plan is very healthy. It's funded to a good degree. So it's not, and it's very small membership as you.
Yeah, and the supplemental management, Mr. Chairman, it's administered by the Florida League of Cities.
Any other just general questions about the mechanics of it at this point? All right. Thank you, guys. What's the next report?
I have a report. This real quick. Did you have anything else, John?
Oh, sorry, I'm good, thank you.
Well, the requested information of the board was attached
Well, go ahead.
directly after his. We just provided a copy of the board schedule and then all the makeup of all the boards and then the definition of what the boards do behind each board. So that was requested at the last meeting.
I know one of the things we specifically asked was, do any of these boards have any spending authority? And I
Nobody,
mean, I know DIB and airport, those are different animals. But the rest of them they don't have a budget or anything like that.
no. No, they don't get paid, none of the board members are paid. Or with allowances, travel allowance or anything like that.
You know, questions about our boards? All right, thank you.
The paperwork that we emailed some this morning, but I have it here. The first, this is a 2-pager. These are just the changed pages in your black red line of the charter. dealing with police services and fire services. And the sentence says the same, which is the city commission shall maintain police services and then fire services with the lead person designated by the city manager, period. And then everything else that was in the charter, this is this one paper here, has been stricken. So that we believe that is reflective of what y'all talked about at the last meeting. A question came up on municipal boards if there was any provision for removal of a committee, or advisory board or whatever. And the answer is that under state law, there is standards on how you remove a member that you've appointed. So and what we have is a copy of section 112.501, and highlighted in yellow deals with grounds for suspending or removing. So the main point is that you don't have to put anything in the charter concerning removing individuals from a board because there's state law that deals with it. So that is provided there. The chart that Caroline's already mentioned, it's a chart of sample cities with salaries. It just talks about where the salaries came from, charter, ordinance, or resolution. Another chart that Caroline did, Chairman, you had asked how do we use the word regulation? And so we just did a word search, and there's a little chart that shows first the word regulation and every time it's used in the existing charter, trying to get things uniform. So as you go through it, that's how it's used here. And then we also looked at the word ordinance. Really just trying to, we might want to, if we use a different word, I agree with you. Let's do it on purpose.
Okay.
The one more thing I had to do.
Can I interrupt you
Yeah.
on the regulation thing? So
Yeah.
like when I looked at this, it just kind of seems like the charter just kind of uses the words interchangeably.
Yeah.
But if you go back up to Florida statutes, it's not like they define the terms differently either way. So if I'm understanding this right, it's just basically we need to clean up the terminology and try to be consistent about what we're calling it.
Correct.
Understood. Okay.
And in 1963, I didn't know any better when I wrote the charter. Now, that's a joke.
Relatively young at the time. I mean, in your defense.
There's a memo about does Florida law require charter to have a provision for urban services? And this was a question that came up. And the short answer is no. You're not required to bake it into the charter because once again, there's Florida statutes that deal with it. I won't go through all of it, but just look at it if you have any questions. But there are even provisions in Florida statutes how you provide water and sewer services outside your municipal boundaries. So, right now our charter talks about, it's odd terminology, but it talks about how you provide water and sewer without the city, but it's trying to say outside the boundaries. It doesn't have to say that in the charter. I think we already have that authority on the Florida statute. And then Mike Burke, I believe Mike has met everybody, but he's my partner also. And Mike handles everything that's related to the planning agency. And question came up, well, what do we have to put in our charter about our planning commission and how that works? And so Mike is here to talk about, we have a copy of the statute on local planning. And seems like I had one other thing. I guess that was it. What was it?
The ordinance is attached also,
Yeah,
just
and
to
the ordinance.
party.
So he's proposed, when you want to, he can talk about, what the charter says now, and does the charter really need to say that to have authority to have a planning commission, things like that.
Yeah, that question came up. Maybe Nevin already told you. Just when I read it, I don't have an intimate familiarity with the planning board, but a decent one. It just seemed like what the planning board does doesn't reflect what's in the charter. Not that it's wrong.
Yeah.
But obviously we want consistency there. So what we were asking for is just, without even any regard to the charter, what is the planning board actually doing? What level of authority do they have? And then we can kind of say, is that sufficient? Is it dictated? Because one of the things we're learning a lot about is obviously home rule power, and a lot of this stuff is already governed by state statute, so we don't even need it. Some of the stuff, so basically if you can kind of give us a primer on what the Panama City Planning Board does, and then we can kind of pull on the threads from
Yeah.
there.
So you've got two things there. First is the Florida State statute, which obligates, mandates that you have, that you, the city, have a local planning agency, and that you designate one, which we have designated. You do it by ordinance according to the statute. So you don't need to have it in the charter. You can take it out. It's superfluous to be there. And then I just as proof of that we were following the law, I've provided you the ordinance in Panama City that designates the planning board as the local planning agency. And so the planning board's probably one of the more active boards that you have within the city. And it is obligated to plan for the future growth of the city through adoption of a comprehensive plan or amendments thereto, oversee the evaluation appraisal report, which is part of the comprehensive plan that we have to do every 5 years or so to update our future growth. And then it also hears and considers zoning requests or rezoning requests within the city. Annexations, if you want to annex it within the city, you go to the planning board first. The other items that would be text amendments to any of those documents I just talked about. And so those, something else would be development agreements. Sometimes developers come and have a long-term plan about developing something, and they want to enter into an agreement so they know that the rules that they're developing under today are going to be the same ones that they develop under, because that's the way they've planned their project, right? So the planning board hears development agreements. Trying to think of any other. All of those items are items that they only recommend. They make recommendations to the city commission over. So those items that I just told you, you come to the planning board first, you go through a staff renewal or an evaluation. Staff presents their recommendations. The planning board hears it and determines whether or not they want to recommend approval, denial, or some other kind of form to the city commission. And then there's another set of hearings. Typically, another 2 hearings are held at the city commission to consider the applicant's request and the planning board's recommendation, and also the staff's recommendations regarding those matters. So all those items I just told you about are ultimately determined by the city commission. Other things that the planning board hears that stays within their purview, with 1 or 2 exceptions, are variances, abandonments. Actually, abandonments are recommendations. Abandonments of right of way or easements end up in the city commission with a recommendation from the planning board. I'll put all that first. Variances, some conditional uses, and certain things like major development orders. Anything that's over 4 or 3 stories that's going to be built, or over a certain acreage that's going to be built, that already would meet the criteria of the planning, the zoning code, or the building code. Those are, think of developments that are of significant enough impact that you want at least one body to, a public hearing body of the city commission or the city to hear. Those go to the planning board for review. The most recent one we've had was there's a proposal for a marina right behind the courthouse where the Masonic Lodge is over there. We had a major development order hearing on that. In order to get to that stage, you have to have met all the requirements, checked all the boxes within the code. But the planning board ultimately has the decision of whether or not that major development order can be issued. So variances, major development orders, and some conditional uses. The planning board hears those, and they're the final decision maker on those matters. And if you don't like their decision, then you may appeal that to the circuit court, and it's on an appellate route, de novo review under certain criteria that the appellate courts dictate as to what those standards are. We do not have any appeals of the planning board that go to the city commission. So if you don't like a decision of the planning board on a variance or major development order or a conditional use, then you get the opportunity to go to a circuit court and say why
Is that process in an ordinance or is that in the statute?
ordinance. By ordinance, we decided what jurisdiction they have on that. We're obligated for due process reasons. We're obligated to provide them an automatic appeal provision, right? First year appeal. But we get to decide who is going to be the body that hears that. So city commission typically has determined that those kind of issues need to go to the circuit court.
No city commission approval on that. We go straight planning board and whatever they decide to sit, no commission involvement.
That's right. Variances, you come to the planning board, and if you don't like the decision at the planning board, you go to the court. Yes, sir. On an appellate review, it's not a full-blown trial or anything like that. You've got to present your record and you argue it, on paper to a circuit judge who is bound by the appellate rules to give great deference to what the planning board has determined.
Yeah, this is way outside the charter. It's de novo review or
It's de novo
abuse of
review.
discretion review?
No, it's de novo review, but only for substantial competent evidence and due process. And those are the only two things you do. And, I caution folks all the time when they want to go challenge those decisions of the planning board that, the judge is going to give us great deference over that provision. And so it's got to be really, really bad, really egregious before a court's going to over.
90% of what the planning board does is recommendations.
Yeah.
Zoning, land use changes, comprehensive plan changes, all go as recommendations to the city commission. And the city commission has another public hearing, typically by ordinance or resolution, depending on what it is.
Usually it's ordinance. So you end up, if you're an applicant for a comprehensive plan or a rezoning or something, you need to change the classification of your property. You've gone through 3 different appearances before a collegial body, one at the planning board, and then a first reading at the city commission, and then a second reading and adoption at the city commission.
Mike, you're gonna be here the whole time?
If you need me to, certainly, good.
Any other clarification questions for any staff at this point? Okay. I know we'll get back to this. I'm trying to have like just these, and then like the debate, the discussions, whatever, we'll probably end up revisiting. We will end up revisiting this.
I can say.
All right, what else do we have with staff?
That's all I had.
One of the things that, and it's in the meeting minutes, we were gonna, hopefully, and maybe we just don't have it. Perhaps some of the stuff that's not in our charter that should be considered. Has anyone had an opportunity to look at that stuff? And if the answer is no, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, found it. Like other examples of cities that have stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it says research model charter and sample charters for things that are not in the city's charter. That's fine. I mean, I'm not calling somebody out, but okay, so let's roll that over the next time. One of the things at least I had talked about was it's not that hard to review the stuff that's already there, but it's hard to know that if there's something that could be there that's not there to begin with. That's where you have to draw on the experience of you guys to say, hey, Tallahassee actually has a provision that's this, and it's not even in here, so there's nothing to compare it to. So if y'all could.
We'll look.
Okay, thank you.
There was one other thing, and I don't have a handout on it, but a question came up about length of contracts. And is that something a charter could even do? We don't really have an answer specifically because we didn't see any charters that attempted to do it. I just wanted to give you a little more feedback on the general question, real quick. One is it's hard to think ahead as far as how long a contract ought to be. For example, there is a contract, you can sell property and there's no restriction in our charter about selling property. You can also lease property. And we had a 60-year lease with St. Joe for them to entice them to build a Hotel Indigo and Harrison's Restaurant. So that's we talked about a 75-year lease. So that's a contract that's long-term. Also, after the hurricane, the city was eligible and received $120 million of money through the Department of Environmental Protection for what is called state revolving fund loan. But it is 0% interest. It is 25% forgiven once the projects are all built. And it's through our utility fund, water, sewer, roads. I believe it's defeased over 40 years. So that's just an example of a long-term contract that you want your future boards to have the ability to take advantage of 0% interest, 25% forgiven, and get $120 million worth of water, sewer, and roads done. So there's just some, and then of course we have the franchise agreements that are typically 30 years long. But I just wanted to give you that background. We didn't find any that had that restriction on it, but probably because people thought about it and they couldn't think of something that might happen in the future where you would regret having a restriction. So that's it. Just a little bit of feedback there.
And the city of St. Augustine just signed an agreement with an operator for their amphitheater and Fine and Performing Arts Center for a 30-year term as well. So there's operational agreements out there at the state level too.
State statutes regulate the terms of the audit agreements. They can be no longer than 5 years.
Oh, that's true. Another thing on my report, I told you I was done.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Any other questions about that? Any other staff reports? Public Utilities, Planning Board, Fire Protection, list of boards, advisory board. You're gonna get back to us on the model charter thing, compensation. Yeah, I think that's everything that was requested. Awesome, thank you guys. Cool. All right. We can probably talk about police and fire together. So you guys have that language, right?
Yes.
So Nevin's already presented that. You guys have copies of the proposed changes. Thoughts? Concerns? On the 22nd page of articles 20. Article 11. This one?
There's a one page.
Oh, there's a one. All right. Okay.
Yeah, there's a one pager too. It's page 22 and 20.
I mean, if I recall correctly, we wanted three things. We wanted the existence of police. We wanted it to be have a lead person, and that lead person is appointed by the commission. And I think they've done that pretty effectively.
Mr. Chairman, and I may be remembering incorrectly. I don't know. I thought the board landed on shall designate a chief of police or a chief of fire, regardless if that's a third party entity.
Yeah.
Just like we designated chief building official, and that was EPCI for a period of time that fulfilled that, and now it's a city employee. So I just didn't know if that were.
City employee.
No, it just says a lead person, so it doesn't say shall designate a fire chief or a.
Yeah, I think we should use the traditional language that everybody knows. Fire chief, police chief.
I'll comment on that. There were several different terms that were used. And then ultimately, the one that was done in the motion was a point person. Then we were asked to provide the language. But lead was used, chief was used. There were different choices that I had. I chose this one, but if whatever you want.
I think for the public to understand what that is. I mean.
So would the suggestion be that the language should say the city commission shall maintain police services with a chief of police designated by the city manager?
Yes.
Absolutely. Fine.
And I understand why you did it that way, just for the common understanding of people who might pick up the charge.
Mr. Chairman, my only question would that ever prevent us from doing something similar to what Callaway does, where they don't have a chief of police. You know, the sheriff department provides law enforcement over there, and there's basically, I don't know if it's a lieutenant or a captain, that's basically the point of contact. But he is not considered a chief of police. He's considered either a captain or a lieutenant with the sheriff department over a certain team and a certain specific region within the county. That might handcuff future staff and commissions from ever being able to consider that as an option.
So I can tell you what my spirit is that there is a breathing body that the commission can poke that's accountable for the obligation of the police services. If we call them chief of police, we call them head whatever, chief guy in charge. That doesn't make a big difference to me. So however you guys want to do it.
Well, then this language that's highlighted is more flexible.
Or do you have, I'm open to any sort of suggestions as long, I mean, not that it's stuff to need, but that's what I thought we were trying to do.
I think it's pretty significant for a city as big as Panama City to push off the responsibility of police and to absorb or take, the sheriff's forces to do that internal job. I don't mind it being a little bit difficult to make a change. I mean, I think the city.
Not advocating either way.
No,
I like having the police.
So we can
No,
kind
I'm
of,
responding to what you're saying. If it takes a little bit of work to change that, I think it should be changed. I think citizens expect that their city this size is gonna have a chief of police and a chief of fire.
so you can kind of do it both ways from a drafting exercise. You could also say the city commission shall maintain a police service with a chief of police, comma, or lead person, comma, designated by the city manager or other lead person.
I like that.
Okay.
That sounds.
Either way, the charter items, we still maintain a police presence.
Yes.
Whether we subcontract out or keep it in-house. Okay. I like that language better.
Good with that?
Do we need a new motion?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, new motion for police and fire for the same language.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Or any other debate on that? All right, all in favor? Aye.
I'm abstaining or recusing from this vote for my requirements. I not discuss the police.
If he abstains
Yeah.
courteously,
Okay.
for anybody who's seen the play, anyways. Nobody's seen 70. All right. Okay, public utilities. So Nevin gave us the memorandum on the public utility situation. You guys mind if I provided a suggestion?
Not at all.
In the memo that Nevin has, I particularly liked the Pensacola language that's at the very bottom of the first page. That language simply says, shall have all governmental, corporate, and proprietary powers to enable it to conduct municipal government, perform municipal functions, render municipal services, and may exercise any power for municipal purposes except when expressly prohibited by law. I think that covers everything that we're intending to accomplish. It's probably not even necessary at all, but I think it just makes it clearer. And unless we're trying to otherwise limit that, which I'm not saying we're not, I don't know. But otherwise, I think that incorporates what we were trying to accomplish, at least what I'm trying to accomplish.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's right. And that factors the state statute in first. Close enough.
I know we were kind of wrestling with what municipal services means, and I appreciate the definitions here and our urban services, excuse me. And I don't think the intention of the board here is to put any sort of limitations on what the city can do as far as the provision of municipal services, as long as it's obviously not contrary to law. But charge, don't charge, upcharge, go north, go King Point. I mean, I think the idea in the charter is that do as the commission sees appropriate. And what do you think? I agree with you. So would the suggestion be to,
That was where I was going, I think, it was that paragraph or something like that enough to cover that whole article on public utilities? Because now we've got
yeah,
a
so
bunch of sections covered under that.
Nevin, under 216. It has provisions for warehouses and ship channels and breakwaters and boulevards and on and on and on. Is that necessary? Or would those types of things be incorporated in the Pensacola language where it says, yeah, municipal functions, municipal services, municipal purposes? Or is there a value in enumerating these things?
I think that I have never looked at a charter for authority if the Florida statutes didn't already provide it. In other words, if Florida statutes didn't allow the city to do these things, I would be very nervous about relying on just the charter today. So probably there's nothing, this does not give us any additional authority. So I think one question is, if you're inclined to just scratch it out, I think that would be useful for us to know. And then we'll go back and we'll confirm that we've looked at it and we don't think you got rid of any authority that you didn't already have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, big picture is the charter, for all practical purposes, is a limiting document. It's not an expanding document. It can't be, right?
I don't think so, but I think that the charter, when it was written, was intended to be an expanding document.
Yeah, but more home rule power.
Well, it deals with how you have authority to go outside the municipal limits to condemn property and how you can go outside the limits to provide water and sewer and things like that. It sounded to me that there was a concern that they didn't have that authority unless they put it in the charter.
At the time, and now they would.
Right.
Right.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think there's anything
Very good chart. That's what I'm saying.
that's,
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay.
We're on the same page.
My only comment to that is, I mean, the legislators have been pretty aggressive with taking away authority and things of that nature and limiting home rule and limiting the ability of local governments to do business as they see fit. So I kind of like having it in our charter, even if it's repeated, because they may change things.
Yeah, I'm fully with you. I think we've just reemphasized that they have all the powers unless prohibited by law, unless they don't. So you're right. If the legislature calls it back, it's gonna happen anyways, but on one hand, it feels kind of awkward to roll up 215 through.
We don't even need it.
We don't need any of it, yeah.
Yeah,
Chairman,
234.
section 219 is the only one that doesn't have that editor's note, but I believe that that's still covered by the. Yeah, we were talking about. Yeah. I don't think Unicode's made the edit yet.
So do we in a position to make a motion on
Let me try.
Thank you.
that? I think you could just limit it to say that you wanted
That
the,
paragraph that the chairman referenced, I'll make a motion that the paragraph that the chairman mentioned would replace all the information under Article, what's that, 17, Public Utilities, and we would end up with just that one paragraph.
I'd second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And Mr. Chairman, I know this is an organic document and you have the ability to go back. We will look at this.
Yeah.
With your, and make sure that my impression is correct, that you didn't give up any authority using by striking.
Yeah.
All right, we have no time here. Okay, boards and commissions. So we'll start there.
So the charter explicitly states planning board. The other boards that are listed have been added by commissions. So planning board is necessary.
By ordinance, right? My understanding.
Yeah.
Or by charter.
Right, but the state law says by ordinance. Other question, why is it? Do we need it in the charter? If I have. Sports. Planning board part, he was saying that needs to be, the statute says it has to be by ordinance.
Oh, it does.
That was my understanding. Maybe I've got it wrong.
Mike,
What was that?
a planning board is established as a matter of law, or the commission is required to establish a planning board by ordinance.
They've already done that, yes.
I know they have.
So it doesn't have to be in the charter.
Correct, yes, take it out of the charter.
Take it out.
Take it out of the charter.
I'm just thinking.
Are there, well, I think this is what we're gonna put in, that there's gonna be in citizen advisory board. That aligns with the census, would probably be underneath of this.
It's true. I completely agree with that.
That's a good point.
100%. Good recollection, chief.
I did have some, so I'll approach by some citizens. I thought I might bring this to the table, for discussion. They
Try to hedge.
they requested, and I haven't done any other research into this, but they requested that any advisory boards not have city employees. Reports. Now, we've got some of them boards like the Supplemental Retirement Pension Fund Board that has city employees.
All the pension boards.
Yeah, all the pension boards. So the conversation was citizen engagement and citizen advisory is obviously they get to collect feedback and then it goes to the commission based off of a true and genuine means of collecting information from citizens. Conflict of interest and how genuine that information is if it's being collected by a city employee.
How many of them do have city employees on them now? Look.
I think just pension boards and the civil service board.
Civil service board has some former employees, but there's no
active.
there's no active employees on the board. The pension boards, those employees have to be members of the plan. They're considered trustees of those funds, but they're managed. I want to get the wrong impression. They meet once a quarter. They get the investment advisor from the Florida League of Cities gets on the horn and they talk about the performance of those funds, and then he offers us options. But there's no real citizen interaction. There are 2 commission appointed seats on each of those boards as well, and those are they could be employees or they could be non-employees. But as far as the advisory boards go, I mean, from a staff perspective, all we do is we get assigned tasks like in this board, and then we go do the research and provide that to the board. I don't think there's any intent from the staff standpoint to influence any board's decision. So.
What are the other comments?
Then whether or not it was charter necessary to have language about any board.
Well, I think that section 259 is kind of all inclusive. If the
Yeah.
commission wants to appoint an advisory board, they can. That's probably helpful to be in the charter.
Yeah, I think so too.
Mr. Chairman, there is one point of clarification. I think the only thing that the cities are precluded on advisory boards is citizen oversight boards of police. But that's in state statute. I think that's recent in the last 2 years.
Just that what now?
The cities can't establish citizen oversight committees for police. They cannot.
Cannot.
Okay.
But again, it's the state statute, so it shouldn't have to be addressed.
I actually think the language, this might be important, if you look at the supplemental retirement, the pension fund board, that is totally different to me than an advisory board. Right, so the language specifically says advisory boards, and there's a distinct difference between advisory boards and I don't know what you would call a pension fund board. Still a board, but advisory boards could be focused.
Were those created by the commission or by ordinance or a statute somewhere?
I believe it's by ordinance. But it's, I mean, I think
It might be could be statutory. Probably I would say for the fire and police, it is probably statutory that they have a board of trustees. For the management and general employees, I'm not so sure. Certainly best practice, but I'm not certain that it's statutory.
So we have planning board that's dictated by ordinance, which I think our intention is we can remove division 2. Except for maybe Cecile's point would be just having something in there to make it clear that there will be a planning board as required by law or something. I mean, a little bit more in depth than that. Just to put a pin in the finish up on the planning board. Would the feeling be to just remove it entirely or just have some kind of provision that acknowledges the existence of it according to law?
I think that's okay.
Oh, Z tax.
All right.
It's in statute.
It's the statute in there.
I think we all agree it's not needed. It's just a matter of is it
Right,
a better document?
Yeah. And then they'll know what. They'll all have questions.
I tried to put myself 10
Pretty big responsibility.
10 years from now, the next board's gonna be looking at this and being like, why did they leave it in here if it's a state statute? Is there a reason they left it here? Like we did with the clerks, there's a ton of stuff on the clerks. Right, we're like, well, what happened? We tried to piece together this story. So I'm an advocate that less is more. If it's already structured, there's no reason to add it into a secondary document for anybody to question later. Was there a different purpose?
There's a couple little things in here as I'm reading this again with the context that Mike gave us is like, I mean, I just glanced at the statute just via Google search and looked at what some of their powers are, but it's kind of hard to read on my phone and on the fly here, but like it says they shall serve without compensation. So I don't know if some planning boards get paid. And then I don't know if we want to even, and I don't want to just add things just for the fun of it, but like, is there any limitation on who's eligible to serve on a planning board? Do they have to live in the municipality or in a ward?
By ward.
Yeah, it's by the ordinance, so you can
By ordinance, but not in the statute.
but not by statute. I mean, there are requirements that we include a school board member ex officio or a school board appointee ex officio, military, a few of those. None of those folks ever attend. And I've served more than just the Panama City Planning Board, and I've never, one exception, Walton County had a guy that would show up every once in a while for the school board. But other than that, those are the only ones that are required by statute, but they're all ex officio members. They don't get to vote. They're just supposed to kind of keep a tab on what's going on. So no, I mean, I think removing it is, obviously I said earlier, you remove it and you're required by state statute to have it. They tell you what the status is. And then the other question was, I don't know of any board that I've represented that's advisory that receives compensation at all. They're all
I
voluntary.
mean, the thing that we constantly debate though is that good policy or does that need to be baked into the charter? Right, the without compensation. I mean, right now it says without compensation expressly, so they couldn't pay me if they wanted to.
Right.
But if you've got these broad powers where the planning board exists and who's gonna be on and on and on and on. I don't, like I said, I don't want to just do something for the fun of it, but is it like, do we want to put something in there that says either they can't be paid or they must be in the wards or they must be in the city or any of that type of stuff, or just leave it by the statutory default?
I believe it by statutory default. I think if we're gonna put anything in here, it's gonna be, do we want any additional restrictions, like a term limit? Right now, there's a term limit on the planning board, right? That could be a charter item.
Mhm.
Not that I'm saying we do that. I don't think that we should.
I mean, I'm leaning towards. I don't have strong feelings. Geez, whether we take it out entirely or we leave some kind of provision in there that just makes it clearer that it does exist and that we're going to follow the laws. But I go back to, I do think these are sort of, and I'm the one introducing them. These are solutions looking for problems. And if we haven't had a problem with planning board members being there for 50 years or, you know, people gerrymandering or people drawing from Walton County to be on our planning, then what are we doing? Like, you know, just leave it.
As far as the long-term existence of a planning board, that's typically good to have at least somebody who's been there for a long time because they remember, you know, we're discussing a minute ago, you know, about why did they put all this stuff in the clerk? You know? And by having someone who's been there a long time, Ray Dubuque served 20 years, 22 years, I think, on our planning board. And we were disappointed when he left because he could recall so many times why we did X, Y, or Z. So that there's a real benefit to that too. And they turn over frequently enough.
So let me ask this question. Does anybody want to entertain some sort of restriction on the planning board?
Well, only as we were talking, it occurred to me, and I haven't studied it, but is there any requirement that the planning board members be made up of the different wards?
By ordinance.
What does the ordinance say?
Yeah, but that you pick from the ward, and each commissioner now picks their.
So there is a requirement for it to have geographical representation.
Is that the way the ordinance? I thought the ordinance just says that be from the city, and then it's kind of a handshake agreement right now.
It hadn't been updated in the Muni code yet, so we adopted that.
Yes,
6
months.
4 months.
Yeah.
Oh, that is very recent. Well, that was that.
Oh, it went into effect in January, didn't it? That's when it went into effect.
Yeah, I just know because Chris Stamps was on there. He's a friend of mine, and he was talking a little bit about how they changed it.
Yes.
But they beat me to it, so.
We changed it in about November of this past year to be that each commissioner appoints from their ward. And mayor's at large. And then the mayor was at large, yep. And it didn't go into effect until the end of January. We gave them time to go pick there. So that's why I think you haven't seen it in the Muni code stuff that you're looking at.
I just heard that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think there are a lot of reasons to be critical of the Panama City Planning Board. However, we are stuck with the default Florida statute as it is.
Yeah. So the question is going back to: is there anything that you think you're suggesting belongs in the charter regarding the planning board that would limit their authority?
I think that's better left to the ordinance, let them figure it out.
Supersede anyway. Ordinance would supersede anyway. State law would trump the charter.
The charter could refine it down. I don't think the state law says you have any limitation on who you pick for your planning board.
No, I mean, if you were gonna do something to limit in the charter, if you were worried about the planning board, you would say that the city commission shall be the local planning agency, or, you know, in other words, if you didn't want the city commission to be the local planning agency, that first level review or something like that, you might do that, but that would be the only.
But you could have a situation where if the mayor picked his buddy from Tallahassee, he could serve on the planning board, or she could.
You're not, but except by ordinance, it requires that you be.
I know, but I'm saying if we struck everything out, then absent an ordinance, the charter wouldn't restrict that.
Correct.
And so, but I think that's a solution for a problem. Yeah. Okay. All right.
My only concern sounds like it has been addressed.
Yeah,
You know,
ordinance.
making sure
Yeah.
there's representation across all communities.
Should we create that as a standard of the charter that all advisory boards and these boards be chosen? This has been a question I've been asked in the past. And right now, we weren't ward chosen, we were commissioner chosen. Same way with the Parks and Rec board. If that was just, that might have been board. The commissioner chose a citizen from their ward for the Parks and Rec board.
That's correct.
So I don't think it was restricted though. They all five got to pick.
I'm gonna suggest no, and the reason why is because some of these boards are very technical. So I'm just gonna pick on the Board of Architects. So if you're like, I gotta find 5 people with architectural knowledge within the city limits of Panama City, I just think you're limiting your talent pool. And then to start picking and choosing, well, the parks people probably should all live here, but it's also like we also share parks too. Now that I'm kind of thinking this through out loud. So I hear what you're saying. I mean, I certainly would prefer the commissioners pick people that live in the city, but as far as like a hard and fast.
I don't think it's ever happened. If
Yeah.
it happens.
Yeah.
I don't think they would do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It should get destroyed.
All right, so then somebody make a motion one way or the other to either strike the entire provision on the planning board issue or make a motion to put some limited language in there that says that we will have a planning board.
I make a motion to strike the entire provision on the planning board.
Second that.
Need a debate? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. No more planning board. And then what about advisory boards?
Any changes on 259 that?
I do think we should add in the charter review.
Yeah.
For the mandation. Read that.
And I know we had language on that many meetings ago, but I don't know.
Before we get to that, do we want to leave in 259 or do we want to get rid of that as well?
I think we need 259, don't we?
Yeah, I think we need to.
Do you need 259? Okay. I don't see a problem with the.
I'll
language.
defer to Mr. Zimmerman, this the appointed city.
He is our senior.
Senior. So much older than me.
Oh, come
I
on.
mean,
Obviously, the city commission without the charter has the authority to appoint advisory committees. And set up any standard or membership or anything, and appoint and give them any duty that they would like to do. So you don't need 259 for purposes of giving that authority to the city commission. Nor does 259 limit them. I think it was written.
I'll share this. I like 259. I don't know why. I know it's kind of hypocritical because we just got rid of 260, but I just like it and I'd like to keep it.
And there's no reason, you're right. I mean, they're not, you can leave it too. So
But is it doing anything?
legally, I don't think it is, but that's not the only test. It may be, you just want it there.
I think what it does do is it brings clarity to you can do citizen advisory boards. If we're 20 years, 50 years from now and nobody looks at the charter's like your guide. If it's not in here, it's like, is there anything that should have been added? Or could we have done something differently? It just gives you clarity on, yeah, you can do
If I'm going to make an argument for why we have advisory boards, but we don't have language on a planning board, is that we're going to have a planning board by statute. Whereas if a citizen is reading the charter, then if they don't know that there's the authority to have an advisory board, it's going to be very challenging for them to find that. And so I think if they saw that and they go, oh, there's an advisory board, maybe I want to be involved with it in some shape or fashion or whatever. So like, I'm not going to die on this hill. I'd like to keep it, but
I agree with you. You know, my perspective is, even though things may exist in other documents and other, legal creations, a person knows to look at the charter, and just to have that little flag there is a good thing.
so do you want to make a motion to keep
Yeah.
259
I make a motion that we keep it.
for a second?
Second.
All right, any debate? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
But now, going back to Brandon's point, I think we do need to add a new section 260
Yep.
for the charter review in X amount of years. Yep. I think that has to be in the charter.
Do you remember where we left off on that? It was going to be like a year after the census or something on those lines?
Correct, right, for the reapportionment.
Yeah,
Do it after the census. So every 10 years, they gotta look.
yeah, starting with whatever the next census is going to be, right?
Yeah. 230.
Yeah, and there was language.
You've seen that language in the news.
Should it be tied to the census? It shouldn't be tied to redistricting, because we're gonna have, the legislators are gonna, some of them want to do redistricting mid-cycle. So if we are trying to track when there are changes, political changes of, who can vote for who.
But just because they're redistricting doesn't mean that the city would have to redistrict. Am I right?
No, I don't think we would have to, but
Right.
can,
But Mr. Chair, I don't think they're doing a census now. I think they're just doing.
They're just redrawing line.
Right.
Last estimates.
So that's different. I think because remember, the concern is that as the population grows and we have to redraw the wards, if the creation of an additional ward or anything like that should come up every 10 years. That's the idea behind it.
If we've already waxed out.
Because, you know, when we had this discussion about creating a new ward, we're not quite there yet, but we may be there at the next census, but we don't want to wait 25, 30 years before they add a new ward or do anything like that. That's the idea.
I think we could put language in there too, like the standard is we review once every 10 years according to the census, but we don't limit ourselves to that. The board could. After we do ours, they could assign another citizen advisory board if they wanted to, so we don't limit it to just every 10 years.
Minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So do you want to make some kind of motion? They wrong.
Yeah, I make a motion for all of them.
So
The motion
Smith,
is-
you get that, all that.
I just.
Yeah.
So
We'll
in
review
order,
that on, we'll review that on the video too.
despite the Robert's rules issues, so I'll make the motion that council draft language that says that there shall be expressed provision for a charter review board. And that charter review board shall be assembled as needed as determined necessary by the commission. But in any event, no less frequently than within 12 months after the census, however you define census.
Nice. Yeah, there's a statutory definition of bicentennial.
There you go.
Because when do you receive the information about the census? I guess that's part of it, because I know the census takes place every 10 years, but the data doesn't come till the year after, right?
Or it's effective, whatever the two is of that decade. So 2032 is when the new like congressional and state house and state senate districts go into play. So 2022, 2032, 2042.
So this next advisory board would have to meet in 2031 and able to make changes to the board to 2032 is fine. So
Well, you'd have to redistrict it based on the population that you gain.
by 2032.
In order for the 2032 elections, correct?
So that's the timing question is, so because the advisory board would have to meet, create a new ward, for example, to then give time for the commission to redistrict.
As an example, that's why in the even years, but even so in a census year, that's why you have the legislature meets in January and February in order to, of an election year, in order to address anything that needs to happen for qualifying, all that kind of stuff.
so should we say that every, no minimum of 10 years, not 12 months afterwards, when it would be
Whatever
2 years?
whatever the sausage making makes it work is the timing question.
Immediately after data, I would say is as soon as the data is posted.
Okay,
Well, let's do it a little bit differently, because it probably doesn't even require a motion. Let's just call this a staff request to prepare language according to that, and then when we have the language in front of us, we can adopt the next meeting. hopefully.
Will do.
Great recollection. Any other things about Article 20, boards and commissions? Then let's go to. We want to keep one on the list, city clerk collector. Okay. Discussions of job titles. Start with this one. We can talk about this for weeks. Since I'm the one that circulated language, sometimes it helps me when I actually put pen to paper on things. And so my feeling is, I know we have differing feelings on this, is that I like the idea of a clerk comptroller that serves as an independent financial integrity function. That they're an officer of the city and they, just like legal counsel, checks all the legal boxes. This position checks all the financial boxes. And that's what I attempted to draft with this language, where it basically says they deal with all of the integral processes of financial expenditures. So the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, they maintain the books. They also provide a forward-looking financial perspective for the commission. The budget function still rests with the city manager. The city manager makes that recommendation to the commission. The commission then approves it. That doesn't change at all based on my language. But that the clerk comptroller would be involved with that as well. And then they would also kind of be the oversight on some of the different budgets that are happening throughout the different departments and just feel independent to raise those concerns with the commission that, hey, Parks and Recs is 50% over budget this year, and they'll fear any sort of like blowback from anybody else because they're an independent financial advisory. And so that was the intention here. I know, Ron, not to go straight at you. I do totally understand the idea that a traditional CFO function rolls under a CEO function. I think that's the reason why that works very well in private enterprise, is because there's a huge degree of fiscal accountability. Not that there's no fiscal accountability with the city, but there's a profit motive with a private enterprise. And in a city, the tendency is not. There's a tendency to spend. And I think our city's been fiscally responsible, but just a general nature of government is to spend and to dole out. And I think having an independent financial oversight that doesn't answer to the city manager is just better policy. And so
I would agree with you. My comment was, I think your first line is it's at the pleasure of the city commission, but I would like them to be able to have a contract also. To be clarified.
what do you mean?
Well, just like the city lawyer, they sign a contract, city manager signs a contract.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I took that for granted.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
if you answer directly to the elected body, you're gonna be hired by a contract.
What would the alternative be?
Well, I wasn't sure by your language. It said at the pleasure of, which sounds like you're the king. You're out of here, you know.
Well, they can still do that.
But
Right.
You can address around that though.
Contract, yeah, I mean, I was just being literal.
Oh, I see.
At the, you know, at the pleasure of is very royal.
Oh, I didn't mean, that more so just means it's the commission
They're the ones
decision.
that-
But just like, I mean, I don't know, I guess, Jonathan, you have an agreement, but you could be terminated at any point, right?
I could,
Yeah, but you have a contract.
I do.
Okay, but other managers can contract around, even though you serve at the pleasure of the commission. If you have a year-to-year contract, that is a legally valid thing to do.
Mhm.
Okay, that's what, yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't know if it needed to be mentioned. How is it dealt with the lawyers?
right now, the clerk and the city manager and the city attorney all have contracts directly with the city commission. And they all say that we can be terminated. I don't know if they uses the word at the pleasure, but it can be terminated without cause. Now, there are different severance provisions, like if there's termination without cause with the clerk or the manager, then there's severance pay. It's different with the city attorney. It's more of a workout. You know, you get notice and then we hang around until somebody else is appointed, things like that. So that's the way it's done now. We can look at the language, but this doesn't exclude having a contract just because it says at the pleasure. It's more of a buzzword. It's like Mr. Berg said, that it is the city commission making the decision.
So I may have gotten out ahead by actually drafting the language, because at some point we have to come up with just an overall framework for what we want to do here. So Brandon, like where are you at after thinking about this for a couple months?
It was pretty firmly on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, I'm still very strongly on the other side of the fence. Using my professional career, like I managed $200 million worth of companies. And the autonomy being from COO to CEO to CFO, it's a partnership, right? Across all three, but somebody's got to take the lead. And then that person answers solely to the board of directors. And I understand what you're saying from a private perspective, right? Private, personal, private equity, all of it that comes together. Like everybody does business a little bit differently, but we're in business to be in business, and we want to make sure we stay in business. We don't want to bankrupt the city. As we grow, accountability. I mean, Jonathan's ultimately accountable to financial plan redemption. He has to draft the financial plan. He has to make sure his department's perform to that. I could see the auditor or the comptroller, not the clerk. The clerk can roll up underneath the city manager for sure, from a reporting perspective. But the board having autonomy to have another set of eyes outside of the city manager, I agree with that. I totally agree with that. It's just it's still too blurred. It's gonna take us to the next level on who's accountable for the city finances.
So the accountability for the city finances should fall where?
The city manager.
So are you suggesting that we have two charter officers? Manager and attorney?
No, I think we should divide the two. The city clerk, record keeper clerk could easily fall under the city
Yeah.
manager. That's just,
I think we're all in agreement on that. And that is not in here. What I suggested is that.
well, just by the name of the job that's
That's
in there.
fair. Yeah,
You know,
that's-
we
yeah.
can.
The record keeping, the meeting minutes, whatever else, I think that reasonable to the city manager.
Yeah, job titles. Okay, so I think we're all in agreement with that. So then we're just back to the finance part of Ms. Smith's current job.
Yes, sir.
Um,
Are we all in agreement on that now?
remove the clerk.
Yeah.
Have it something else.
Great.
And now we're back to
The comptroller part.
the comptroller part, yeah.
Do you mind if I ask staff a question?
Sure.
Is there from either just a subjective or objective standpoint, any concerns from staff that having that record keeping function under the city manager?
Not for me. It's largely statutory anyway. I mean, there are certain requirements that need to be met for the city clerk portion of the job. So I don't have any concerns separating the two at all.
Well, my understanding is the statute mandates that stuff occur. It doesn't mandate who does it or what the title of the job. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, nobody's
That's
suggesting
what-
we stop doing official records.
That's what I mean.
Okay.
The clerk's duties are largely statutory, so you can separate those out easily from.
Yeah. Okay.
And they still are required to be done.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be under the comptroller or city clerk, comptroller, whatever. I don't have any concerns with that.
No real financial to the clerk's duties. And so if you remember, a lot of the cities, a large number of cities around the state have the clerk's duties under the city manager, but not the either comptroller or CFO, whatever you want to call it.
Okay. So for staff, Nevin,
Yes.
and tell me if I'm wrong here, guys. The consensus is that the record keeping, note taking function that would traditionally be associated with a clerk roll up under the city manager.
No issue.
So I'm asking just from a drafting exercise, can y'all have that prepared for the next meeting?
Yes, that's what Caroline, we've tentatively identified the sections that do that.
Yeah.
And the answer is yes, but let me ask a question. If everything that the clerk function that's already in the charter is something that's already governed by Florida statutes, do you want to see it again in the charter, or do you want to take the approach that you've taken on some other functions, which is it really doesn't need to be in the charter? In other words, keeping minutes, that's in the Florida statutes. But we can look, if there is something that we need to mention, how about this? That when we look at it, if there's something that needs to be mentioned because we feel like the statute doesn't cover it, we'll mention it and explain why.
So I would say the fact that meeting minutes happen, that's going to happen as a matter of law.
Right.
Where I think the value of putting it in the charter is where that function rolls up to. Because at a certain point, we have to define the roles of whatever the officers are going to be. So by having a mention in there that there shall be a manager and that the manager, that's one of the manager's obligations, it defines the role rather than defines the obligation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that might be an addition under the city manager.
Yeah, I think that's the idea.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
we certainly can.
All right. So now.
Caroline's on it.
And I think
Alligator.
for what it's worth too, is this, I mean, it'll be a change, and I think demonstrating that change, at least in this version of the charter, the first time would be good, and then that next charter review committee could do whatever you guys are doing and just simplify.
They may scan the whole thing, I don't know.
Yeah. I think you may add it all back in. Mr. Chairman, the only thing I think that you guys might want to consider is, do you want to provide any specificity that the clerk reports directly to the city manager, or leave flexibility where the city manager may put that particular position? That's something I would consider. It is a pretty important position, so just something to consider.
I think it could be under an assistant city manager.
It could. So no, that's just, I think y'all should consider, that's all.
Yeah.
City manager, comma, or his or their designee can take care of it.
Yeah, I'm with Ron. I think you title it whatever you want, as long as that function is getting accomplished, just like all the other city services, call it. So then now, what are we doing with this financial function?
While you're here, if I may, Chair, while you're here, I may not see you at the next meeting, but how do you feel about maintaining the financial portion of the present city clerk job as an independent?
I think it's a good idea. Just a separate set of eyes,
Mhm.
like you said.
But would
Fair.
that change if you reported solely to the city manager other than commission?
Yes.
You think it would?
Yes. Because I know would no longer, that person would no longer have the authority to go to the commission with their data, information, reports. It goes to the city manager, not to the commission.
I mean, people's self-interest usually impacts what they do. If they're afraid, if they have a difference of opinion, a legitimate difference of opinion, and the boss says they want it this way, and they're under that boss, the chances of them bringing that out are very slim.
What does the partnership,
Are we talking about clerk or CFO here?
CFO.
okay, what does the partnership right now look like when you create the budget? I'm sure Jan has there's a big partnership between two of y'all on building this, and from a finance side.
Just for her particular department, she does.
Yeah, and like audit fees and transfers, debt service payments, the overall big picture stuff. But as far as the day-to-day operational, I just give them my departments. That's the only input I have.
Mr. Vice Chair, once the budget is adopted and we go to execute it, if we submit things that, that aren't in the budget or modifications in the budget, then, there has to be a budget amendment and all that kind of stuff. And, she's involved in that.
This does consult Jan's office a lot during budget, just for revenues and, hey, how should we code these things for like the mechanics? It's really helpful.
What does the education to the board look like right now, financials? Because I've seen a lot of board meetings where they have a ton of questions and the questions don't get answered. We'll come back to you, but then I don't know what coming back looks like from a citizen perspective. They can't answer the questions in the moment, either to you or to Jan from a financial perspective. So what does reporting up to, if finances are going to be reported directly to the city commission, what does that process look like currently?
It's a memo that the clerk treasurer puts on the
Monthly
first,
financial statement.
the first meeting of every month has one.
Meaning they get an email and it's up to them
It's on
whether
the,
or
it's
not.
on the
It's
agenda.
actually on the agenda. Yeah, it's under consent, but it's the last item under consent, so they just vote to acknowledge it. And if they have any
Yeah,
questions, they
bid.
can pull it off if they want and discuss it individually. But it's a formal memo that's got some specific numbers and percentages on there.
Anything that gets asked at a meeting that we can't answer becomes a public records request, and it gets responded to through the public records process.
Say that again?
Any questions from the audience that we can't answer from the dais?
Okay, from the audience,
Yeah.
okay, that was the key, that was the key thing I missed, okay.
I wasn't referencing from the audience, I was referencing from the dais. I've
Yeah.
seen the dais ask tons of finance questions that didn't get answered.
Yeah, so, I mean,
I don't-
I'll speak frankly, in the past, that was mostly political. Jan's memos answer the question very specific now, and I don't think you get as many questions from this commission, because it's all there in her memo every month.
And we removed that opportunity for them to connect with the CFO or finance officer,
You mean the public?
the dais, the commission. Then they would have to go through you.
Actually, no, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, because it is an agenda item on the first meeting of every month, a member of the audience could come up to the podium during audience participation and ask a specific question about the clerk treasurer's memo for that month at that particular meeting, because it is considered an agenda item.
So let me ask the board a question here. I think everybody agrees there's going to be a financial function, whether it's a bookkeeping function, a finance function, which I think of more of like a forward-looking function. That needs to happen, right? So then I guess the question is going to be is that a third? And there's going to be some details on like where the line is between third officer and city manager. Is there an officer on that position, or does that entire function roll up to the manager?
I'm
The CFO?
officer. Yeah, I think it should be a third.
Yeah. Talking about the CFO function?
CFO, comptroller,
Yeah,
whatever.
a
bring the title.
separate officer, separate independent officer.
Where you at, Brandon?
I say it rolls up to the city manager.
And
I think you get to split the vote on this.
This is why you get paid the big bucks.
yeah, all of them have one. All the top cake.
Yeah.
Take mine to go.
You take the rest with you, sir.
I
got an office full of 45,000, I'm sure. Yeah.
So Brandon, what's
Here's my difficulty, and it's just an opinion, really, at this point. Is the city manager is in charge. He's the head administrative person of the city, period.
Our entire.
In the charter. But yet, if they got wrinkled up, or whoever is gonna come after Ms. Smith, if they get wrinkled up, the new controller can go around the city manager to the commission and get something done. And I have difficulty with that. If he's the head of the city administrative duties,
so
3 members of the commission could go to the CFO controller and do something the city manager might not even know about.
so
I have a difficulty with that.
I'm actually very much aligned with you on that. That's
They
not
can't-
what I.
they can't not know about it because it has to be done in public. If there's more than
You
one.
can surprise them at the board meeting
No,
Right.
no. so hold on,
when the
hold on.
agenda comes
So,
out.
Look, Ron, we'll talk here. The way I drafted this, and we're not gonna vote on this today by any stretch, although maybe we have like the framework done. I envision the comptroller being a pure ball and strike caller, an umpire. They don't get to play the game. They get to review the budget that's approved by the commission, measure it against what's happening. They get to review the invoices that are put on their desk. They get to cut the checks. And they could, I guess, if for some reason they're being obstinate, the manager could go to the commission and be like, hey, the clerk's not, or the comptroller's not doing their job. Like, I'm submitting the stuff that I need to submit. They don't have any subjectivity to make expenses that the manager hasn't seen. Again, they're almost entirely a reactive position, other than providing some forward-looking insight for the commission if they're looking at a bond deal or whatever, and the affordability of that type of thing. But otherwise, I don't want a world where the comptroller is making any decisions that move things forward. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So then it should fall under the city manager.
No, it's an independent eyes and ears where the city manager and some department are blowing the budget out. I want somebody to be able to go to the commission and not fear retribution from the city manager. They're like, listen, just almost like the city attorney. They go, I'm looking at your document. This is not a fair agreement. The manager may say, but it's critically important and the team wants it, and on and on and on. And the lawyer's like, I'm telling you, I don't answer to you. I answer to the commission. And I'm telling you, this is not sound legal principles. It'd be the same thing. This is not sound fiscal principles. Or that's not true, because there's a degree of subjectivity with the law. But it would be more so that they're not following the process with submitting invoices, or the ability to go to the commission and say, listen, I've reviewed this budget and we're wildly off on some category. Anyways, that's where I'm at. But I don't want a world where commission and comptroller CFO are making decisions that go around the manager. Absolutely not.
To me, the way it's set up now, that could happen. Not that it will happen. It could happen.
But the way that Brandon wrote it, he specifically said, you're just calling balls and strikes. You know, you're just letting them know there's a difference in the analysis. And it's up to the commission to decide.
To me, and that's no different than any other department head to me.
Yeah, my experience has been when people are under, their employment is under someone, they're much less likely to speak up. I mean, that was the way it was when I was active duty. That's why they pulled the Area Defense Council, which I had that job. I would defend people with their Article 15s and court martials and things like that. And they learned that when, at the beginning, I was under the commander's authority. I was only gonna push so far when that commander wanted to make an example of that whole airman. Because that guy was right in my OER. So they said on every base, the Area Defense Council was separate. And I had a chain of command that left the base and went straight to the headquarters and the Pentagon. And all of our training was, that was the reason. And it really does work like that.
I think I love the checks and balances of the finance side, right? Having an independent auditor, maybe not just a finance auditor, but a process auditor too, to say, hey, here's these opportunities in these different departments that maybe the city manager's not seeing. We have a city manager structure. We don't have a city manager CFO structure, right? We don't have a commission structure. It's a city manager structure. Somewhere along the lines, it's gotten blurred over the years, and it's here in the charter. Right? That's what we're trying to close the gap on, is are we going to continue to have a city manager structure? And finance rolls up underneath of the city manager in every structure. I mean, all of the departments have a finance component. They write checks, they have purchasing. Every department has that, but do we have, I think what we're looking for is the checks and balances. Is it working? How do we improve it? Not just from a finance perspective, but like operations as a whole.
Mr. Chairman, and I asked a question of Ms. Smith through you, but I know that when we have that, we do have independent auditors, and they brief me and Jan after their audit, but I believe they brief all 5 elected officials.
They work for the
individually.
commission.
They work for the commission. They don't work for me and Jan. So.
But I think Jen said at one point that they get paid an awful lot of money.
Yeah, it's
And
very
It's
expensive.
very superficial. They're really not doing the daily deep dive, which her job is. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's crazy how much they're paid. It's like, wow.
Yeah, how necessary is a deep dive all the time?
Well, that's why we want that position to be independent. They would
I think
take
it's critical.
that, it would take that role. We wouldn't have to pay the auditor for the deep dive.
I mean, I very much may have blinders on, because obviously I come with my context and I come with my attorney context, and I can't imagine, I mean, if you follow your logic further, then there should be one officer and everybody should roll to the city manager, including the city attorney, which that seems insane to me.
Yeah.
Well,
And so, like, to me, legal integrity and financial integrity and operational integrity are 3 separate branches.
I completely agree.
But I mean, honestly, we may have to. We have a couple more things to go over today, or we can continue to work on this one until we get somewhere, or we may just have a split vote.
we made progress on the clerk.
We did, we narrowed it down to what we're really
I
concerned
mean,
about.
put you on the spot, because I know I sent this to you guys, or I think you guys got it yesterday around noon. It has been a lot of time. Would you guys digest this so we can come back to the next meeting and see if it works or not?
As a suggestion, you might want us to look at this and not worry about whether it's going to end up under city manager or a separate CFO, but just look at your
The language.
language and the different duties and what needs to be in the charter, regardless of which side. Is that something you'd like us to look at for the next
I
meeting?
would, and I would like to ask Jen to look at it
Well, sure.
from your perspective and see if what
Because-
additional holes or tweaks you think are needed, because we have someone with all these years of experience, who knows? So I'm glad you're here.
And that's something that I know that I'm sure Caroline's looked at it. I hadn't really looked at the description of the clerk job and bonds and finance and what needs to be in the charter that's not already governed by state law, but we'll look at that, and then where you decide to put it, you can.
All right, let's do this. Can we table this one? I think we've all said what we're gonna say today, and then we'll come back another time, see if we can get taken care of. This will also give us an opportunity. We have not had an opportunity to discuss taxation or bonds at all. We had 15 minutes for each one. Let's try to keep it to 10. I've got a couple other things I've thought about that I just want to present. Float ideas at the very, very end here. And so, have you guys looked at the taxation stuff?
Not very quick.
So the high level question is going to be the article we on.
Agenda
15.
items.
Yeah, sorry, article 15.
Yes, okay.
This may be something we need staff, either staff to help us with now or at the next meeting. Home rule power is, there's certain taxes that the city can levy. I know they don't directly levy ad valorem taxes, correct?
Correct.
That goes through the county. But even the ad valorem tax rates, those are also established via the, those are established by the city. Okay. And so the way and then you have
But there's limits, statutory limits.
statutory limits, right? Okay. On homesteaded property,
On all properties, yeah.
on the millage rate increase, on all, I thought that was just on homesteaded. So my understanding is you kind of got three tranches of taxation. You've got the property tax, ad valorem tax as one tranche. You've got like a special assessment tax, like the fire district as a good recent example of that. And then you have the excise taxes. Are there any other taxing levers that a city has?
The merchant license fee.
Yeah.
That wouldn't fall under the excise taxes?
Yeah. It would.
Kind of.
Okay.
I was just reading the charter. It talks about excise taxes, but then it also talks about gross receipts taxes, which is what the merchant.
Right. Gross receipts.
I mean, one thing that I saw in here was this could be interpreted to actually limit the types of excise taxes that the city can do. If you wanted to read it that way.
What would be helpful, I think, for this convention is we could do a memo that talks about the merchant license fee or the merchant's tax. It's 1% on gross receipts, and it is a significant amount of income to the city. I believe it's 13 million a year.
I think it's 14 this year.
14, yeah. So it's kind of equal to the ad valorem taxes. So it's really significant. And it's a grandfathered tax. There's only Panama City Beach, Panama City. That's
That's
it.
it, yeah.
In the state of Florida. that
Really?
Have that tax. And it's an occupational license tax. It was grandfathered because in the early 1970s, the tax was in existence when they prohibited all taxes except for those that are already there. So we've been very protective, as Panama City Beach has also. Panama City Beach doesn't even have an ad valorem tax. Panama City has always had both to even things out. So it might be useful for you that we've obviously have done a lot of work in this area to get a little bit of the history of it. We're very jealous and protective about changing things because it's a grandfathered tax. So you just want to be cautious. So I'd be cautious too, obviously on the charter as well. But you don't, we need to give you some more background on that particular tax.
So the question for the board members to think about before the next meeting, and maybe staff can help with this too, is like the home rule power is going to allow the city to adopt all these taxes with the exception of the sales tax that the city's grandfathered into through the merchant fee. Okay. Would there be any other limitations on either the types of tax or the amount of the tax or anything that would say be an express prohibition or anything that would require something to go back to the citizenship to get approved? is that something that even wants to be included in the charter, or just leave it open? They can do any taxation as allowed by law.
At the, excuse me for interrupting, but yeah, the state law, as Ms. Goon has pointed out, the state legislature has become very active in regulating what cities and counties do when it comes to ad valorem taxes.
Mhm.
So it's every year it's a new ratcheting down.
I think from the aggression of the state getting involved in every little thing, and if they even have provisions, if the commissioners do anything different, you can be sued. I mean, they're like nasty. I think we need to be really, really careful tinkering with anything that we're grandfathered in. Because if they could pull it back away from us, I'm sure they would.
But as far as further limiting, I'm with the chairman. We don't need any further limits in our charter. We need to have all the flexibility that we can have under general law.
Since there's a special session coming about property tax, you need all the open doors you can find.
The school seems to have a better lobby, Ron.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna say that because they're not doing what I asked them to do, but we'll see.
I mean, I would agree with you from the sitting in your chair. I would wonder if the citizens would agree with that too. If the citizens would like to say, hey, listen, we don't want to handcuff the city to do what we want, what they need to do. But on the other hand, I mean, there's been some other things that have been adopted from a taxation standpoint that have not been super popular.
No.
And I know the recourse is elect different representatives, right? I'm just saying there might be something worth.
But again, is section 148 necessary? In the
Well,
charter.
Well, I think that's what the warning is. Maybe it's part of the grandfather.
I think one paragraph there again, like we did on those other ones, one paragraph to say you have the power to tax. Because everything else in this section is there again handled by ordinance or statute.
I mean, if we want to leave it in to make someone feel better about reading this later, that's fine. But it's something sensitive.
Right, but only with regards to the jealously protected grandfather portion, I think.
But I don't think that's even in here.
The merchant fee?
Yeah, it is. It's called, it's the gross receipts tax.
Okay.
I just think we need to be careful and not take the foundation out from under our protection.
I don't know that it's offering any protection, but I see I understand.
Mhm. Well, we're gonna get legal.
Yeah, is there anything that we want staff's help with for consideration of the taxation section for next time?
Well, I think that what he offered definitely to make sure,
Background.
yes, that we don't pull out a tooth that we need.
Anything else? All right, bond section, I looked at that one as well. That's even sparser than the taxation section. I mean, the only thing that would be,
It's the next one, sections. Article 16.
Does it say?
There's nothing there.
There's nothing there.
No.
Yeah, it's eventually gone.
so just stuff to just chew on. I'm getting a little slightly dangerous on municipal law at this point, but my understanding is you've got general obligation bonds that are very highly regulated by the state. You've got revenue bonds that are also regulated by the state that are secured by the revenue that the project is going to generate. So we don't really need to fool with that. Then you've got others, just general short-term borrowing that the city can do. And there may be some consideration to any sort of limitations on that. Other than that, I don't know what else you put in here. But I'm not saying we should or shouldn't. I'm just, I keep going back to like, what levers can we even pull here? We can't pull the general obligation bond, I don't think, because it's just not worth it. We're not going to pull a special revenue lever to restrict that because it's all secured by the revenue it generates. It'd just be, hey, are we just going to go mortgage something for the fun of it? Is there any sort of limitation on that?
If I may, just a real quick background on general obligation bonds, you can only issue those if they're approved by the elected. So that's, it's highly regulated. Panama City has none, as far as general obligation bonds. revenue bonds, every other bond is you cannot pledge ad valorem taxes. That's what a general obligation bond is. You're pledging ad valorem taxes and you're agreeing to have a tax millage that's high enough to pay the bondholders. Every other bond is you pledge non-ad valorem revenues, such as water and sewer revenues or merchant tax fee revenues or things in your budget that are non-ad valorem. And there you go through a process and the financial advisor says you have sufficient funds to make that pledge and the bondholders are comfortable. So those are, but every other bond issue.
This might be academic, but are all those triggers in the pledging of collateral and not in the actual borrowing of the funds? I know there's probably not many instances where they are going to lend the funds without the collateral, but I'm going back to my association experience. Very few of my associations have any limitations on borrowing. A lot of them have limitations on pledging collateral. I don't know if this is similar with municipal law.
Our limitation is really driven by the market.
Yeah, so
you pledge non-ad valorem revenues.
So is it a thing for municipalities to get unsecured loans?
No.
Well, yeah, no, we don't have a.
I mean, maybe in theory, but in
always-
practice,
we always pledge.
this doesn't happen.
We always
Okay.
pledge something.
Yeah, the banks regulate really what we're allowed to borrow.
Anything, I mean, do we want anything with?
Do we need a section in the charter that even talks about lending? Do we need it?
A broken record, is it necessary?
Unless you want to put some kind of limit on
Yeah.
debt service.
Yeah.
If you want to think about doing some debt limits, that would be the only thing that I could think of. None of those are.
I'm all about fiscal accountability, and it was one of the things I actually talked with Josh Street about. And but municipalities are just not the same animal when it comes to borrowing and defaults and bankruptcies and things like that. It's just not. It's not akin to like the private enterprise. And so I'm not inherently opposed to something. I just also don't know.
I remember after the hurricane, there was discussion held 3 or 4 years ago, recent discussions about the percentage of X amount of money that should be in the bank after a national disaster, right? And it was like, we're 6 years post emergency, and we're just now talking about lowering. We should have some debt. We're going to have some debt, but what's a healthy percentage of debt? So whether or not we put it in, I don't think it should be a charter item. I think it was operationally a weakness in our structure at the time. We should have had, okay, we're going to save 15% into this account. When there's a national disaster, we understand we're going to lower that to 5% because we're getting exhausted of that. But like that was an operations thing. I don't think it should be in the charter. I would say remove bonds all in general. But operationally, it is communication the weakness. We don't need to.
That's exactly right. So the just for some context, we had a reserve policy that was assigned reserves for for disasters. So it was like for our enterprise fund, it's 3 months of operating capital. And then for our general fund, it was I think it was 30% of our budget, and then 10% for unassigned reserves. So like for those one-time purchases, capital items and projects. And then the commission at a point prior to Hurricane Michael lowered that 10% to 5%, the unassigned reserves. But those are always reserve target balances. So it's a policy, but they're targets. And right now we don't meet those targets and haven't since Hurricane Michael. That helps.
Yeah. If we would have anything in here, I would have something about you were to have an X amount of, not an X amount, but to know your reserve percentage. But I don't think we need to do a charter. I think that's a process.
I mean, that's in your report every month, percentage on hand of what.
Only because we're below target. If we weren't below target, I wouldn't include that section of the report. It's just a budget to actual report, except for we are below our target policy limits.
All right, y'all give some more thought to the finance and the taxation and the bond section. We can vote on that the next meeting. Can I float just purely just want to float these ideas, because as I was sitting here, do we need some kind of conflict of interest policy at all? Like, is there an obligation for a commissioner to disclose if they've got some?
It's a state statute.
I know we don't have a recall procedure. Is that something even worth?
State statute.
The statute has one?
You're preempted by that.
Oh, well, that answers that too. Not to pick on something that recently, is there a code of conduct type thing? I mean, I just didn't know if there's any sort of, just kick that around. There's something that I don't know how you'd enforce it, I don't know how you vote on it, whatever else, but at a certain point, is there some sort of expectation of conduct of commissioners? And recourse there. Then I just wrote down a attendance requirement. Probably not that big of a deal.
That's one.
Yeah.
Jared was asked about ethics commission would be one, but I don't think you're talking about something as formal as that. Maybe you're talking about something that the city commission might take its own action on, a censure or
Talking
something.
about it, yeah, something like that, where if somebody's conduct on the commission is so extraordinary to potentially expose the city to liability, there could be something there to do. I mean, I actually had a conversation with Nevin about like one of my board members who actually like was harassing the manager. I was just like, I can't get him off the board. Like it's not a tool that I have. And so, it was a very awkward position. So I was just kind of floating that for you guys. Like I said, I don't know what we can do about it. If there's anything to do about it in the charter, just share that.
Yeah, for sure.
I may be wrong, but I don't think you can put in the charter to remove a commissioner.
No, it would be.
You have to have a recall
It's
to do.
by the municipal recall. That's
it.
Yeah, that
Oh,
is,
really?
that's
If they get
preempted by
arrested or
municipal recall.
something,
Correct.
no, but still then.
The governor would remove him at that
Yeah,
point
then
in
the
time.
government would do it.
But, that's why I was asking if what you're talking about was like a censure process where, hey, I think that's inherent in their authority anyway. Yeah, they,
So the only path to remove a commissioner is recall
or governor.
governor. And
Yeah.
what's the path to the governor?
Malfeasance, misfeasance, crime.
I know, but who reports that or who delivers those results or whatever? How does it even get on the governor's desk?
Ethics Commission.
Yeah, ethics commission or,
Oh,
it wants to be front page of the paper, kind of a notice, right?
Yes.
You get charged. I'm sorry, if you get charged with a crime and the governor reads it in the paper, then the governor can remove you. I mean, that's one way it gets on his desk.
The ethics commission, that's like a state appointed thing? Or?
Yes, that's a state. You can file a complaint with the Ethics Commission, and then it goes through a process which is fairly long.
Is there a process now to suspend commissioners? Maybe not remove them. If
The
there's an
governor,
ethics violation or complaint.
the governor can do that. And the governor can at any time pick up something and suspend or remove. And the ethics, at the end of an ethics complaint, there's nothing automatic, but presumably then they could refer it to the governor's office for.
Could the commission have autonomy if it's a majority vote to suspend a current commissioner pending the results of an ethics complaint?
I don't know. I mean, you can. I don't know. I mean, we can look at that, but I tend to think we
Because
can.
then someone else would have to take the spot too. Bigger problem, might create a vacancy on the board when happens.
The commission, the leftover members of the commission appoint a new commissioner.
Within a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
Or then there's a special election. In fact, I think Miss Ward sent that to us last time. I will circle that to the board. I can't remember if she just mentioned it to me, or she actually emailed it. She watched some of the conversation. Yeah.
There has been a mayor removed in Bay County before, and they used the vice mayor because she was so far through her term, so they didn't go to special election immediately. It was kind of odd.
Mexico Beach.
Probably.
Yeah.
That's the most.
Happens every 3 years.
Mr. Chairman, did we skip on purpose item number 13 about compensation of mayor and commissioner? Or you intended to speak that up?
No and yes. We did not skip it intentionally, and we'll pick it up next time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay, so
cover a lot.
let's. I have notes, what I think is for next time. Do you have notes for
I do.
next time? Let's make sure we're on the same page here.
Sure. Have researched the model charter and small sample of charters that have items that are not in the city charter. The attorneys to review. I can't read, change to Article 17 to ensure no authority has been foregone. We're gonna add the Charter Review Advisory Board. Language that they'll meet whenever, however the sausage gets made. Attorney draft language to roll up city clerk duties to, not city clerk, just the clerk duties to the city manager. The attorney and clerk to review chairman suggested language and what should and shouldn't be in the charter as far as the CFO, comptroller language. And the attorney's going to provide background on fees to ensure no revenues are jeopardized by removing the tax language. Is that everything?
Yeah, so we can get the updated version. Sorry. Okay, yeah, I think you're right.
Okay.
The new versions we'll discuss bonds and tax and hopefully vote on those next time. Then we can remove the planning board language. We're gonna leave the advisory board language. Y'all are gonna provide suggested language on the charter. The charter board and the charter. I was trying to say charter twice. Let's make sure we get back. Let's put the mayor and commissioner compensation at the top of the agenda next time.
Okay, sure thing.
And then,
When's our next meeting? What day?
yeah, when's the next
April 23rd. It's an entire month from now.
Do we happen to have the schedule thing that we had for a while?
I did not.
I have
bet Miss Smith, the other Miss Smith does.
She's got a whole package.
Yeah.
So tell me your question about.
What would be the next
Oh,
provisions if we can get to them?
okay, that I don't have in front of me. I have everything from the back.
It should be in
We
the.
ran down it. We were on board, I had to say. Yeah, we.
I can send it out.
If anyone wants an updated red line, these are, you can have. Nothing we.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I've got plenty of copies. But it's got today's date in March that shows you that's the most current.
Mr. Chairman, is your thought, should we try to squeeze in an extra minute to ensure we meet our benchmark?
I mean, yeah, I don't know, possibly. I was just trying to see what was coming up next. Yeah.
So I can tell you which articles you have not covered yet. That is the question.
That's how I'm flipping through here.
Yeah.
So there's Article 14, finance generally. That's not this one. Then sponsor taxation today. Public utilities, commissions.
And we talked a little bit about whether it would be good to have, plan another public meeting and join in with city commission, and I think as we're getting closer to the end, we can project time.
Yeah, I think when we have a pretty much rough draft, that would be when we're kind of through.
So do we need,
Start the education because they're gonna have to vote on it. Well, once the commission adopts or throws it all away, whatever they choose to do.
so do you think we should have our educational outreach, so to speak, before the commission so that the citizens can debate, or that might influence the commissioners to vote one way or the other?
I know, yeah, I'm thinking at the next meeting, if we can get through, I think bonds and tax will go very quick. Utilities should just be an approval. Charter board should just be an approval. Planning board, advisory board, all that stuff. If we can get through clerk and commission compensation, Those are gonna be the bigger ones. If we can get through those, I think we'll be in really good shape.
Do we have Article 14 scheduled on any of those? They kind of rolled into some of the stuff.
Is that finance?
Yeah.
It had been scheduled for meeting number 8. Had we gone by?
It
you
seems like
meeting
this is a lot of what we're talking about with the.
Are we on meeting 7 now?
Finance in general.
Yeah. All of them have been superseded. So,
Is that more strike the whole thing?
On finance, we'll also look at that.
Yeah.
In contemplation of, is it already covered by state law? We can give you that feedback.
because it seems like that's what we're arguing about. Is the city manager gonna make an estimate? Who does it? Who audits?
Anything else? Want to make sure we have on the agenda for next time? Thank you guys on the board. Fun process. I appreciate the professionalism and staff for being prepared. You guys. So we'll see you guys. What you would just say April 20th?
April 23rd. If we determine that we are truly either ahead or on schedule.
I think we're on schedule.
We're back on schedule, yeah.
April 9th could work for the city if you felt it was necessary.
Let's just stick with our schedule that we've got. Yeah, good. Yeah, we'll see where we are. So. It's our motion to adjourn. So moved. Response favor motion.
Second.
All right. Yes. Favor. Cool. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, a motion to adjourn is always in the